welcome to our video about carbon capture and storage. We hope that you learn not only the fundamentals of what carbon capture and storage is, but also about its origins, the pros and cons of it, its role in our society, and how it might shape the environmental/energy creation process in the future. And with that, let's get started. Carbon capture and storage is the practice of collecting excess carbon and dioxide from the atmosphere and storing it somewhere that it doesn't affect the atmosphere, like injecting it really deep underground. Carbon can be captured in a variety of different ways, like by sucking it out of the atmosphere after it's already been produced or created, or by collecting it as it's produced from burning gas and oil. Carbon capture technologies can potentially reduce greenhouse gas emissions to a very small fraction of the current amount it is today. Now, you might be a little suspicious right now thinking, well, that sounds great, that sounds kind of magical, but don't worry, we'll discuss the potential issues with carbon capture and storage after we talk a little bit more about how it works. So let's talk a little bit about the history of carbon capture and storage. In the early 1970s, carbon capture and storage was used as part of a process called enhanced oil recovery. Enhanced oil recovery is where carbon is injected into exhausted oil digs to help drag up the last bits of oil left there. It grew to be a very popular method because gas companies profited from getting the last bit of that oil. So CSS started being implemented more and more, but not for the purpose of storing carbon and helping the environment, but rather just to get oil from the earth. In Norway in 1996, the world's first carbon dioxide storage project was implemented, but not for the purpose of getting more oil from the earth. It was made just to store carbon dioxide. This project was called the Sleipner Fields, and it was groundbreaking for the use of carbon capture and storage as an environmental practice. In the early 2000s, people started really realizing that carbon capture and storage can be used as a sustainability technique, and large groups like the Carbon Sequestration Initiative were launched. During this time, a lot more carbon capture and storage projects were started for the actual purpose of just helping the environment. However, there were also some really big problems along the way. For example, there's this huge project called FutureGen in America that was supposed to be the biggest carbon capture and storage project of all time, costing millions of dollars. But it failed in 2008. This made the public and large companies suspicious of carbon capture and storage as a practice. CCS has come a long way since its roots, but it still has a long way to go to start making really large environmental impacts. That's also why we need to understand the policy behind it. Who makes these big decisions for CCS? How does a project get started from the ground up? There are different companies, NGOs, and even governments around the world that are currently involved in CCS. Gas and oil companies are hugely involved in carbon capture and storage. This is because they can use it as their kind of environmental save-all, especially because you can use carbon capture and storage retroactively. This means that gas and oil companies are free to continue drilling as much oil as they want and not really caring about the environment currently because they can always promise to fix everything afterwards using carbon capture and storage. An example of this is the Oil and Gas Climate Initiative, which is created by a lot of the large oil and gas companies. This initiative claims to help reduce environmental harm, but they really just push carbon capture and storage without making any plans to actually implement it in the future. They do this because it means that they wouldn't have to change any of their current practices. The government is also very involved in carbon capture and storage. There has to be safety regulations for injecting thousands of pounds of carbon dioxide deep into the earth. The government handles things like zoning issues, tax credits, and all the different policies that are required to handle something this large. Environmental justice groups are also very concerned about carbon capture and storage backfiring in the future. For example, the Energy Justice Network has been very outspoken in their opposition to carbon capture and storage, saying that it's just life support for the coal industry. Carbon capture and storage could be a very effective method of removing emissions from the atmosphere. There are a lot of statistics out there boasting the potential of CCS, claiming that it could remove up to 90% of all the man-made carbon dioxide currently in the atmosphere. However, the 90% number of CCS is only really attainable if it's practiced completely perfectly on a much larger scale. CCS implementation is costly, complex, and requires a lot of regulatory and liability challenges. It's also controversial because it allows us to continue using fossil fuels. CCS is a highly politicized technology in climate policy circles, as we've seen before when environmentalists and corporations have different ideas on the sustainability, reliability, and effectiveness of CCS. Another reason why this debate is so highly politicized is that CCS, like a lot of different environmentally focused technologies, are usually perceived as permanent fixes. This means that CCS could be understood as a sort of desperate technical attempt aimed at solving the energy issue without fully analyzing the picture as a whole. As a consequence, the desire for corporations to reduce their energy emissions could be decreased because CCS is seen as kind of the cure-all to be done after all of the emissions are created. When you're looking at an issue as large as carbon capture and storage, think about how it affects all the different players, like corporations, for example, who might like it because it means they wouldn't have to change their current policies, versus environmentalists who are more concerned with, well, how does this actually affect the environment? And then, of course, there's us, citizens. What does carbon capture and storage mean to you? We hope that the remaining information in this module help you develop your own opinion of carbon capture and storage and maybe what you think about the future for it. Thanks for watching!